Hey, my name's ShawNshawN. I sell art on ShawNshawN.co and screenwriting on ShawNshawNacting.com. Today we're going to review The Courier. So The Courier is about Greville Wine. He's this sales guy, and he gets approached by the CIA MI6. They need a secret courier in the Soviet Union. He's like, what are you guys talking about? I don't want to do that. So what had happened in the backstory before that was Khrushchev comes to power. He is building up all this craziness around him with all this militancy of first building kind of the Berlin Wall, cutting off the West and East Berlin because obviously people are defecting on a massive behavior because they hate, socialism. At this point, everyone's seeing it's a failure versus capitalism that's right next door. Then Khrushchev moves on to test the Tsara Bomba, which is the largest bomb ever built in the world, 50 megatons. I did a whole painting on it, so go check that out. And then on a third, he moves nuclear missiles to Cuba and kind of creates the Cuban Missile Crisis with JFK and almost takes us to World War III. So this is the backstory of why, this one guy, Oleg, who is kind of a military secretary, kind of middle tier managerial inside of the nuclear testing, he has access to all these nuclear missile tests and all of the designs of the missiles and kind of the sites. And he decides, this is crazy. This is going too far. There might start a nuclear war. I got to reach the Americans and somehow help them stop the Soviets, or at least neutralize the Soviet threat so they can accurately assess any kind of strike capability and know that not to full strike against the USSR, because he knows actually the USSR doesn't have full strike capacity. So there's no way they can attack, so you should react to USSR appropriately. So this is the backstory. They get the sales guys involved. He doesn't want to be involved, obviously, but they're like, hey, it's for country. You're within the nuclear. If they strike from Russia, there's no way to stop the missiles from killing your family in England anyway. And he's like, holy crap, which is great. It's kind of like emotional blackmail. They really set the protagonist like, oh my God, it's life or death. So it's a really great backstory for him to go to USSR, and he's not really skilled at spycraft at all. He's not a spy at all, but they pick him particularly because he isn't a spy, and he'll kind of fly under the radar for a while, just enough to them kind of get some of these documents back and forth. And so that's building up, and then in the background, his wife is becoming very suspicious of his trips to USSR. He comes home, and he's just like, he has a burst of energy from doing these great missions, and they have wild sex, and she's like, what the hell is this? And she complains to her girlfriends, and she suspects something's going on. And previously he had an affair. So this is kind of the nice backstory on Greville's side. Maybe he should, bail out at any time to save his marriage, or does he save the world? And so it has a really great backstory set in the Cold War Russia. So let's get to the analysis of the story. So it has this great story in the background. It's based on real historical things that happened. They probably fictionalized some arts to make it work as a film, but really this guy was really a spy. They really had the Cuban Missile Crisis. They almost went to World War III. They had the Tsara Bomba test. So there are real, concrete historical, huge pillars of history surrounding this story. So it's really great to kind of etch out another really great Cold War story, especially around the Berlin Wall and, just this crisis with, JFK and the Cuban Missile Strike. It's always a great story to build on. You have, Khrushchev building up all the crazy militancy, so that's a really great driver in the background to, how crazy the times were. And I think they could have built up a little bit more of, because at this time frame, the school kids had to do nuclear test drills, and they would go into the basements and everything, at least in America. I don't know if they did this in UK, maybe they didn't do this in UK, but I think they could have shown the child of the salesman going to a nuclear missile drill test at school, just really briefly, maybe 2 minutes of cut of film, and then come home and tell his parents like, oh my God, we had to test it. Are we going to die, Mom, or something? And really build that case of how serious this Cold War. It would have been a much more brought home, I think, in this film to make it a little bit more personalized with maybe the kid of the salesman. Also maybe the kid of Oleg, because he has a kid as well, and maybe they could show them doing, I don't know if the Soviets had kind of missile drills as well for the Americans, who knows? But that's a kind of a possible add-on they could have done to the story, I think. In the story, it seems like they're showing like the really good side of the Soviet Union, and the Soviet Union would have controlled the plot and it's strictly the travel zones of the salesman, so he would only be able to see Moscow. He wouldn't really see the countryside, but you still would see little glimpses of how horrible it is. I mean, people that go visit North Korea now, it's the best example because it's a very Stalinist era as well. And even when they go there, they're limited to the capital, so you think, oh, what could go wrong? And they still see a little bit of the reality kind of poking through here and there. And they could have had a little bit of that, I think, a little bit more in the film to kind of show like, ooh, there's something terribly wrong in the Soviet Union. They did show kind of the Soviets when they went to visit the US, like, oh, they're trying to seduce us with this, all this materialism and all that. That was a really good sideshow, but they could have showed a little bit of the grisliness of the Soviet Union a little bit more. I'm kind of poking through to make it feel a little more serious. It didn't feel as drastic, I think, as it could have been. I really like the backstory of the wife of the salesman. She, you know, he had an affair before and she doesn't trust him, and then he's going off to the Soviet Union. She's like, why are you doing that? That's totally crazy, which it is. But he can't tell her that there's this secret mission to save the world, basically, or, you know, get this information from the Soviets. So, uh-oh, my light bulb's going out. And so she's suspicious he's having an affair because he comes home and he's all like juiced up from the mission. Like he had another successful mission, he could have lost his life, and then she's like, boom, wild sex, right? So of course you're going to have wild excitement of, you know, that roller coaster of going to the Soviet Union. You might get caught, you get the information, you get out and you're like, thank God. And then when you get home, you're just like, you know, your adrenaline rush will be so high after that. So it's totally believable. But from her standpoint, he's like, he's a complete changed person. She's bitching to her girlfriends and she plans to just ditch him, you know? So this is a really backstory to the poor character. He's like, does he keep going to the Soviet Union? He's going to lose his marriage, you know, but he saved the world. So it's really on the fence. I really like the fact that the escape plan fails. This is very realistic for Soviet era. They had controlled gates of the KGB and every town was controlled. Your travel routines were controlled. You know, no one had the internet, so it's just very difficult to kind of wing your way around. You could obviously use printed maps, of course, but you know, you had to get paperwork to get literally everywhere. Same thing in Nazi Germany. Any of these kind of dictatorial regimes, it's very hard to get around. There's no way to get by the system without getting caught. You know, if you think of that American kid who got caught in North Korea ripping a poster and then he got tortured. Perfect example, right? So, you know, it's not surprising, and I think that was very realistic. They're just kind of following the real story, but they could have made it so he escaped, you know, and make it a little more traumatic, so to say, but he doesn't, so that's kind of interesting as well. I mean, you have that great contrast between capitalism and socialism at the same time, so that's kind of a really, unfortunately, because today's politics are kind of sliding more towards socialism again, it's important to bring up the facts of the real horrible things of socialism. When you go full socialist, you know, you end up with the dictatorship and human rights abuse and people going to gulags and all this stuff, and, you know, I don't know, it just seems like people have forgotten today, so it's really good to bring up a story like this. I really like the costume designs. It was very crucial to make it feel like the 60s. It's probably the cheapest part of the film in the sense that it's easy to find the right clothes and restitch them or whatever you have to do, remake those clothes of the Soviet period, American New York, 1960s, a sales guy at that time frame, the wife of that time frame. So that really stitches the story together, so to say. I mean, you have the historical backdrops, and they've kind of glossed over some of those. You know, like in New York, they have to use historical footage because they really can't recreate 1960s New York without a huge cost. So it's just easier to use some historical footage and kind of fit that into the film. And that was kind of cool as well, because you really see that drastic CGI effect of modern day digital film versus the analog physical film of the 1960s. You're like, whoa. I mean, they're probably using TV footage. That's why it's a little grainier than film. However, it's just like, wow, the difference is just stark, right? But it really fits that, you know, historical frame even more. You know, dialogue was pretty good. I like the story a lot. I would encourage you guys to see it. I give it a thumbs up. Hopefully you guys give me a thumbs up. If you'd like to subscribe, you can subscribe below. And I'll see you in the next movie review. Thanks for watching, guys.